Upgrade thought. We're back. New studio.
Yeah.
How we feeling in the new studio? We were just talking about how fire the studio is, but also how we're gonna look back and
be like, this is ass.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I hope I'm looking back on this video and the video you just recorded in like 20 years like garbage.
Yeah. Well, I just wanted to take that video because it's like, okay, like for example, Marquez Brownlee, like the tech. He's like this tech YouTuber now, like 20 million subs, like crazy viral. He hit like after his first like 71 YouTube videos or something more than that, he finally hit his like first 100 subscribers. And there's this video of him being like, guys, thank you so much. Like, think about that. After posting like, I think it was either 100 or 171 YouTube videos that he posted, like different tech reviews of products. He finally hit his first 100 subscribers, and he took this video and he's like, guys, like, thank you so much. I promise I'm gonna keep making like these really good videos for you guys, blah blah. And like, that's just what I wanted to demonstrate here, because it's like, this is what you were doing when you were 20 and you didn't have money. Is what you did was you turned your room, which already didn't have that much space in it, and you cut it off in half and turned half of it into a podcast studio, even if it meant that it's hard to get in and out and it's hard and it might be more annoying to sleep and you have less space to work. This is what you wanted to do. So I wanted to highlight that, because that's what, when someone looks back at you and you become a successful podcaster and they're like, dude, like, yeah, you have all this money to afford like the cool setup, obviously you're gonna go viral. You're gonna be like, no, dumbass, take a look at this. Like, this is what I was doing when I didn't have money and I didn't have a lot of space and I didn't have a camera. I set up a phone on a tripod, connected it through continuity
bought
camera.
$70 lights.
Yeah.
Bought a wall divider.
To split your room in half. Like, you gave up half of your already small room to do this. So I respect that, and I wanted to highlight it.
Yeah, no. So on the one hand, like, this, you could look at this whole thing and be like, yeah, humble beginnings. But it also feels like an accomplishment that I was able to, like, do this in a room that just felt like it was not ever designed to be a podcast. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and it looks sufficiently professional, I'd say.
And I assume the guy who, like, what did you say, his first 20 subscribers or 100 subscribers?
Yeah, his first, yeah.
How many was it?
He made the video thanking his first 100 subscribers, but it was after posting, like, 171 videos.
Yeah, it's interesting.
So imagine doing 100, like, how many tech reviews would you post until you just quit? Like, if you posted 100 tech reviews and didn't hit 100 subscribers yet.
Crazy.
Almost everyone would have quit there, but he continued and now is at 20 million subs and is the top tech reviewer on YouTube.
Yeah. No, but what I was going to say is, like, this feels like a milestone, despite the fact that, I'm hoping in 20 years this feels like a humble beginnings, like, what the fuck was I doing? Right now it feels legit. Yeah. And I'm sure that YouTuber felt good about the 100 subscribers. You know what I mean? So it's interesting how it's like, it's kind of both at the same time. On the one hand, it's like a humble beginning, but on the other hand, it's like, wow, that is so cool.
Well,
you know what I mean?
Also say this was when YouTube was so young that like even 1 million subscribers was basically unheard of then.
Okay.
So like 100 was cooler at that time.
True.
Like now 100 subs isn't even cool because Mr. Beast has like 256 million.
Yeah. No, but it is interesting how something that can feel like an accomplishment at the time can, like, as you grow more and more and more, you look back on it and it's like, I thought I was so cool back then.
Yeah.
I am so much better now. Like, I noticed the same thing in the gym, dude.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I remember first couple weeks in the gym, I was like doing my rows, my bench press with like the 35s, and I was feeling myself.
Yeah, ooh, yeah.
And now I look back and I'm like, dude, everyone else in the gym must have been looking at me like, what the fuck is wrong with this kid? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it's pretty cool, dude. But at the same time, definitely motivational.
Mm-hmm.
Trying to get the bread up, trying to grow the pod so that
I
can. Honestly, dude, I would love to have like a tech team. Like that would be like
that would be optimal.
That would be incredible because then I could totally just focus on talking to people.
Yeah, dude. When I see how many fucking posts Alex Hormozy makes, I'm like, how is he pumping out so much content so quickly? And then I'm like, hold on a second. This dude pays $30K a month for his content. Like, he just sits down and his team tells him exactly what he's doing that day. He makes the video, and within like a day, they have it fully edited and like ready to be posted with the thumbnail done, 10 versions of it. Like,
yeah,
it's like no wonder this dude can do it and like just bang it out like instantly. Like,
yeah. So anyway, one of the things that I wanted to bring up today, so we were kind of talking on the way back from the gym about like reasoning skills. So what exactly are reasoning skills? Like, are reasoning skills even a thing, or is it just that the person who kind of knows more about a subject will typically win a debate? And like, in order to get good at debating, you should just learn about, like, on the one hand, you could say, okay, you know, reasoning skills are kind of overrated. It's typically the person who is more educated on the subject is going to be better at debating, and you would least want to debate someone who's extremely well educated on their particular subject. But you could also say there are some people who are able to just contend with information faster, grapple with information faster, sort information faster, in a way where if two people are equally educated, the one with better reasoning skills is always going to win the debate. So what exactly are reasoning skills? And part of the reason I wanted to bring this up actually was because just to provide some context, because I found this really fascinating. So I was watching JP's podcast, and he had like this headmistress from the UK, the Michaela School, I think, which I didn't really know that much about. But anyway, she has this reputation for being like the most strict headmistress in the UK, and she has she's been incredibly successful, and her students do really, really well on all like the standardized
do
tests.
They like her?
Yes.
Okay,
Well, at least according to JP when he visited,
okay, yeah.
he was like, yeah, the students, I could tell they love you. I could tell they love this environment.
Yeah.
They were talking about, so the topic of conversation sort of arrived at the issue of teaching kids how to think versus teaching them what to think. So they basically get to this topic. And I remember at our high school, a lot of people had the critique like, this school is teaching us what to think. They're not teaching us how to think. And she actually made the point here, which I had never heard before, because I'd always sort of taken it as like a cliche. You should learn how to think, not just what to think. I'd always kind of taken that as a given. She made the point that you can't teach anyone how to think until you've taught them what to think. So her point was that you basically need to give someone information in order for them to learn how to think about the topic. Like, they need to learn the objective facts before they can kind of think within the context of that subject. And here was the example that she brought up. She was like, I don't know anything about cars. If you tell me to think outside the box and come up with a new car, I could never do that because I don't know cars. But if you tell me to think outside the box about education, I have done that. And the reason that I've done that is because I know the education system. Because I've studied it, and I have the cold facts about the education system. So it sort of made me think, like, ironically, it made me think, what's the kind of balance between the skill of thinking in a certain way versus just knowing enough about a particular topic to be able to think the way someone would who's competent within that topic? Does that make sense?
Okay. I'll try to go through one by one of those things.
Yeah, so it's a very you don't have to answer. Hold on, you don't have to answer everything I just said. But my main question to begin with is like, what are reasoning skills?
Right.
I wanted to tell that story just to contextualize like why I'm so interested. I also think that's a really interesting point because, like I said before, everyone kind of throws around the whole learn how to think, not what to think.
Yeah.
But that's her point, is that it's a much more complicated subject. You know what I mean? Like that debate.
I agree.
So what are reasoning skills?
So I think at the most base level, the actual answer to what is reasoning skills is the ability to draw conclusions that are necessary from the statements. So just that I would consider basic logical or reasoning skills. So for example, if I say like, if it is a dog, then it must be blue. I see a dog. What color is it?
Orange.
Yeah.
No, I'm joking.
So blue.
Yeah.
So that's like the most basic form of a reasoning question, of like reasoning ability, and then obviously it gets more complicated. So I'll give you one example of how it can get more complicated. So if I say, all dogs are blue. Is the following, if the statement that all dogs are blue is true, let's say that that's true, what is the truth value of this statement? if it is not a dog, it must not be blue. Sorry, if it is not blue, it must not be a dog.
Yeah.
It's true.
That's true.
Yeah. But you can already see how that's a more complicated version of building on the first. Yeah, you don't just instantly get that. Yeah. So, reasoning ability that's what I would consider the most basic form of reasoning skills.
So it's
the ability to draw necessary conclusions from the pre-existing truths.
But do you really think
or assumptions?
So do you think the best debaters in the world are just able to kind of draw conclusions that are well reasoned from just extremely large swaths of high level examples of what you just talked about?
So I think to some degree it's a huge data set of and the problem is with pure reasoning or pure logic, all of the conclusions are necessary based on the axioms or the truths or the statements. So as long as those statements are all true, then the conclusion must be true. Then the problem with the real world is that you never know whether the axioms or the statements that you have to begin with are true.
Or if they're the same among multiple
people. So even just for example, one of what was considered one of the most core basic truths probably until Einstein came around was that was Newtonian mechanics.
Yeah, or the Euclidean geometry is another example.
Exactly, yeah. So this was a truth that everyone took as that people thought you could just say, yeah, well, all three sides of a triangle always add to 180 degrees. Everyone thought that was true until non-Euclidean geometry came out, and so all the conclusions that were based on that now couldn't be true.
They've now been undermined.
Because the one assumption that everyone based everything they said off of was oh, well, that was wrong.
Yeah.
So that's the complication of when you actually bring reasoning ability into a debate. It's all of every assumption is based off of incomplete, non-complete knowledge about whatever thing you're talking about. We don't have a study on every single human. We have a controlled, randomized sample, which is very, 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 very good. But there might be outliers. There might be alternatives. So I think it's pulling data from a bunch of different things and extrapolating out a story that makes sense. But the brain is very weird like that. And Sutherland talks about this a lot, is that no matter what data you feed a person...
He interrupts about
it. Yeah. I hope you never have him as a podcast guest, not only because you just roasted him, but also because he would interrupt you.
Yeah.
But...
Mr. Sutherland, Stop!
Yeah, but he makes
the thing about apologies.
He makes this point, and this is commonly known in psychology too, as just confirmation bias, but it's basically that you believe something first, and then the brain is extremely good at coming up with a completely rationally sounding but unbelievably wrong story about the facts that you were given. So somehow the brain has a funny way of, if it believes in a thing, fitting whatever evidence you give it into a story that is true with that belief. So this is the other part about reasoning that's makes it the best thing and the worst thing. Because it's the best thing because you could say, okay, we don't have to appeal to authority on anyone, or we don't have to, we don't need someone expertise to come to a solution, or we don't need, ad hominem can't determine the thing. The only thing that can determine the correctness of an argument is reasoning. Is does it make reasonable sense? The flip side to that is that our brain can somehow make a rational story of pretty much any evidence that we present it. You could give two people the exact same shred of evidence, and one person says, exactly, that's the reason why we need tax cuts, and someone else says, that's the reason why we don't need tax cuts. So this is the ultimate benefit and problem with reasoning ability, is that it can bring you to any conclusion, but it also prevents you from getting caught in fallacies like the appeal to authority fallacy.
Yeah, no, I'm not sure if this is exactly related to what you were saying before, but I was kind of thinking about how, because I was sort of thinking, if everyone has different axioms, then they can all just come to complete... I don't know, I think this is sort of what you were saying, which is if different people have different axioms, then within their different, epistemological structures, they can just come to completely different conclusions, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, I was sort of thinking that this might be one of the ways in which religion could could be valuable. Not saying I think this for sure, but this is just a thought that I had. Like, maybe part of the reason religion is so useful at times is that it provides people with a common axiom, which basically it gives people, so this is one of the things JP would probably say, like, it gives people the opportunity to play within the same
rule set.
Within the same rule set, it gives people the opportunity to play a common game.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Even despite the fact that, like, for obvious reasons, there are places where religions go terribly wrong.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, I don't really think we have to get into that. But there are points in the Bible that you could point to that are like, this is a moral abomination.
Yeah.
But the thing is, though, on the other hand, religious axioms can give people like a common game to play because you're operating within kind of the same structure with the same axioms. Whereas if you get rid of that, now everyone sort of has fundamentally different ways of viewing the world.
Yeah.
And now you're going to come to different conclusions.
You're getting a call.
Talking about?
You were just talking about religious axioms.
Yeah,
giving everyone an equal.
I was just playing around with the idea that maybe there could be something good about having a universal axiom. That way, people can operate within the same confinements. You know what I mean?
So I have an interesting thing to add here. So there was this, Charlie Kirk.
Of course.
Yeah. So there was this clip of
he's a bully, man.
Yeah.
Bully.
Yeah, he does bully college students. But Manu probably sent you this clip. But they were arguing about religion, and he was basically talking to a student, and he was like, can I play the clip for you?
Yeah.
Okay.
I will say, though, while you're pulling that up, I guess I could,
Yeah.
I guess the counter-argument to the idea that I brought up is that, well, it doesn't give people universal axioms because if a Jew is talking to a Christian, they can't talk philosophy anymore because their axioms are totally different.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. And, well, I was going to say, but I think it's fine. When I'm trying to find the clip.
But yeah, I haven't read Wittgenstein yet, but I know some, like, for example, my friend Miles Siegel, he's really good with philosophy, and he was basically saying that one of the things Wittgenstein wrote about was that if different people have, so basically the only reason things like math and science, and this is a very Manu argument, the only reason things like math, science work is because we agree on the axioms. But philosophy isn't necessarily like that because everyone has different ways of viewing the world. So since different people have different axioms, it ultimately boils down to like, okay, for Aristotle the axiom is virtue, for Epicurus the axiom is happiness.
Yeah.
Like we want to be happy for Aristotle's virtue. Like it's just different.
Yeah.
You're operating within different structures, so of course you're going to come to different conclusions. So what's the point of even?
Yeah. Okay.
So my just to finish this up, a great way, in my opinion, the way to solve this is to first agree on the axioms before you have a discussion about philosophy.
I agree. Okay, so I agree. So this is what happened in the clip, and you'll see what this relates perfectly. So he's asking a student like, why was the Holocaust wrong, or like, do you believe it was wrong? And the student is like, well, saying that implies that there is a truth value to derive from the moral status of the Holocaust, and I don't think there's a truth value that can be described from right and wrong. Like, right and wrong isn't a thing that is true. It's not like a thing that is true or false. It's like a belief. And the guy was like, so he was like, Charlie Kirk was like, okay, so you think the Holocaust was okay? And he's like, well, I don't think saying it was okay would mean you could derive a truth value from it, and I don't think you can. And he's like, so you have no way of saying that it's wrong objectively. And the guy's like, yeah, I don't. And everyone in the audience was like, oh. And he's like, I mean, the kid was like, oh, it would be great if there was a way that we could like objectively say this was wrong. Like, obviously I'm against it, but we can't. And Charlie Kirk was like, yeah, I wish there was a book for that. But I happen to disagree. Well, give your opinion first.
Well, no, I mean, I think that's. I think I don't really have any comments on that. I mean, it is kind of upsetting that they had to talk about the Holocaust. Like, it upsets me that like we're using linguistic and like moral relativist issues to talk about the Holocaust.
Yeah.
Like, come on, bro. Like, really?
Yeah.
we're gonna convince ourselves that, oh, I mean, there's no objective morality, so the Holocaust technically wasn't objective. Like, bro, come on.
Well, I don't think...
I agree in the epistemological sense that it's not objectively wrong,
right.
but it is kind of an upset. You could see why that would be an upsetting
I can see as well. But it's funny because, okay, so this related to this whole conversation with Manu about like everyone having different world axioms, because it's kind of the same thing within morality. So really the answer to me there is no such thing as like a truth about what is right or what is wrong.
Yeah.
But everyone that's reasonable on Earth, pretty much, other than psychopaths, have the axiom that conscious life should not be harmed unnecessarily.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
whatever unnecessarily may mean.
Yeah. Innocent conscious life should not be harmed with no reason.
Yeah.
And in the case of, and like, so this is where then you can actually make progress. Because you know how you just said you should start with the axiom.
Yeah.
Start with that. Like if me and Charlie Kirk were debating, the only thing that I'm having as an assumption in a debate about morality, there is one thing I believe is true without any evidence, and the thing I believe is true is that it's wrong to kill a conscious experience for no reason. That's the thing I believe, and there's no evidence for or against it. That's just the core belief. And then building on that, then I can say, based on that axiom, the Holocaust was wrong.
Yeah.
So, you see what I mean? So
I have something to bring up.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Sam Harris, whenever he has, and again, whether or not you agree with his point about like the moral landscape and using happiness as like a guide to morality, he always starts off those debates with like, for this book to work, the only thing you have to grant me is that if everyone in the world was miserable right now, that would be bad.
Yeah.
If you grant me that, then this can work.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But he does like make the concession that at some point within every kind of knowledge, I guess you could say knowledge structure, you're going to have to at some point pull yourself up by your bootstraps and just
say this has to
this
be
is
truth.
True. Yeah, like, I don't have to prove it. This is just true.
Yeah.
And for him, the axiom is if everyone didn't feel good, if everyone felt, or he talks about the button. If there's a button that you could push that would make everyone in the world a little bit crankier, a little bit more miserable, a little bit, hungrier, a little sadder.
Hungrier is funny.
You shouldn't. Well, I don't know. Some people are doing crazy stuff on the bulk, so maybe I should take that one.
Yeah. All the people who are fasting are like, yes, I need to be made hungrier to make like my true sacrifice.
Yeah. But anyway, his point is like, if there was a button that could do that, you shouldn't push that button. That's the axiom.
Yeah.
Like, you can't prove that that's true, but if you agree on this, then we can move forward.
Yeah.
So it's interesting, like, whether or not you agree with the conclusions he draws, and that's another whole tangent. I do think it's honorable that he's starting off the discussion with an axiom and asking people to first grant him that before he gets into the conclusion.
Yes, I do too.
Yeah.
I do too, because what happens if you don't do that is you argue until you end up at the axioms anyway. And this is what happens in abortion debates, and actually I was going to say with abortion especially, it's like, I feel like that's an argument where people get to the core and they just have different axioms. Like, there's no way to resolve the conflict other than...
What do you think the different axioms
are? So I think the different axioms are, like, liberty, which would be for the pro-choice side, like bodily autonomy. And for the pro-life side, it would be, like, protecting consciousness or future consciousness. Mm-hmm. And so this is what I was talking about with Micah, is, like, if you have a fetus at 19 weeks and for the viewer, let's say medically somehow we know as a fact, I don't know how we know this, but apparently the parts necessary for a conscious experience don't arise until week 20 to week 24. So before week 19, any part necessary for a conscious experience doesn't exist.
Like a brain, theoretically.
Let's say it's a brain or a prefrontal cortex, whatever electrical
Don't hit the
activity,
fact check button if you're listening.
Electrical activity. Yeah.
Don't fact check this.
Yeah, this is, to be honest, that's what Destiny said, and I trust that he did his research.
Well,
he could be wrong.
I'd like to make a point here.
Yeah.
Like, those guys are under so much scrutiny. Like, if they were using facts that were untrue in abortion debates, you would know based on the comments section.
Yeah, that's what
you would see a million comments like, nope, week 20 and brain development in week 20 not true, brain development in week 20 not true. So if he said that and it didn't cause an eruption in the comment section, I think
or among scientists.
Exactly. I think you have a good enough reason.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So assuming, for now I'll assume it's true, but I think we have pretty good reason to say it's true.
Yeah.
Then the question for me, which me and Micah got to, which is just becomes to the point, okay, fine, at week 19 you're ending to something that doesn't have a conscious experience yet, but will be conscious. And it's kind of like, Manu likes to bring it up like this. Like, it would be like if someone was about to start a charity, which is like, a charity is like a innately good thing. Like, there's no real argument that a charity is a bad thing to start. And if the person was going to make it, and you was to take action to stop them from starting that charity, then it's a question of which do you actually value more. Because it's like, we both know what's happening now. We both value a conscious life, and we both value, people's right to do what they want with anything, as long as it's not harming someone. So then the question is the fact that, because when you end a 19-week-old, you're not ending a conscious experience. So the question is, do you value the future conscious experience more, or do you value the bodily autonomy more? And that's honestly just a question of axiomatic belief. Like, I don't think if there's a disagreement there, it's possible to make progress, really, other than just talking about why you believe in that axiom. And I'll flip this for a second as well, because I think
can you even talk about why you believe in an axiom?
Well, we'll get to that in a second. That's another good question, though, too.
Yeah.
But the other version is what you can do, and I think this is a good example of what good reasoning ability actually is that if someone has axioms, like let's say someone believes that the Holocaust was a good thing, if you can get them to agree on an axiom, such as conscious life is inherently worth protecting, then you can catch that person in a self-contradiction.
Yeah.
So that's how you actually could make progress on a debate, because now you know what you have to do. All you have to do is prove that the Holocaust intentionally harmed conscious life for no reason.
Which is shouldn't be a hard thing to prove.
Yeah, exactly.
If you've ever taken a history class.
Exactly. So like there, I actually think there is progress to be made, because it's not a problem with axioms. It's a problem with whether they thought that axiom was achieved or not.
Yeah.
So, and you can catch someone, because they might say, oh, no, well, it doesn't count with the Jews because they're not humans. Okay, then what makes a Jewish person not a human and you a human? And then they're going to point to some difference. Oh, they have bigger noses. And then you point to some other thing. Well, here's an Aryan guy who has a big nose too. Does he not count? No, he counts. Okay, then what's the difference? So they have to prove to you how they're not contradicting themselves. And if they can't, then they, on principle, would have to lose that argument. Because of the reason.
Well, yeah.
But
I'm totally imagining some like crazy Nazi just making the most circular thing. It's like, Jews aren't human. Okay, so what's a human? Not a Jew. Yeah. Well, how do you?
So that's a different thing. Someone with good reasoning ability should be able to show someone how the thing they believed might be against their own axioms.
Yeah.
This crucial thing in abortion, though, where it's like just neck and neck, I think is not an example of that, though. It's an example where there's really, unless you can get core to changing someone's axioms, there's no progress to be made on that debate. It's just purely a disagreement based on how much you value. Like, it's like the trolley problem, because there's no real way to make progress on which is more important.
Yeah. You just
like
have
you just have fun. Like, if I believe that you shouldn't, switch us, like, if you shouldn't ever take action because that's infringing on their liberty, no amount of extra deaths would change my mind on that. Mm-hmm. If that's if I believe that in all cases liberty must be protected. And just to take this to a logical extreme, I saw this guy at a Republican protest, or not a protest, like a convention, and he was standing at a table, and the guy was like, so what do you guys support? And he's like, so we not only believe in the right to bear arms, but also the right to bear nukes. So you can go to a very logical extreme, and if I said, yeah, but if a guy detonates a nuke, millions might die, he might say, yeah, and that's something I'm willing to accept if it means giving liberty to all. And again, I don't know how what reasoning skill you can use to make progress on that. Because if that's a core axiom that he believes...
If it's an unprovable truth.
Yeah, if he believes that liberty in all cases is more... The only way you would be able to get around that is if you could catch him in a self-contradiction.
Yeah.
So you would have to show him an example where he tried to exercise his liberty and millions died, and he was like, wait, I wouldn't want to do that. And then you could catch him. But other than that, if he truly would take that action himself, it's very, very hard to say, like, to make progress on that with reasoning skills.
The other thing that I could imagine being very difficult about all this kind of working with axioms is it might be... I could imagine that it could be difficult for someone to articulate the axioms that they have.
Yeah,
like
that's another
if someone has a way of viewing the world that they can't fully explain, then they might not even be able to say the axioms that they're operating within. You know what I mean? Like if you can't even, so that creates a serious problem, right? Because if two people are talking about
you can't even start on that axiom to agree with.
They don't even know where they started from. Then how are you even going to get down to the axioms and sort all of that out if the people in the discussion don't even know what their axioms are?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They just feel it, but they can't express it.
And that's a core thing that's exposed in the trolley problem, because a lot of people say, oh, take the switch it off the 5 people to the 1 person. They say yes. Then all of a sudden, when you switch it to throw 1 guy off a bridge to save the other 5, people are like, no.
Yeah,
it's like, hold on, bro. Like, that's the same exact thing. You're like, it's the same exact trade-off.
Exactly.
It's just emotionally different, and now you're giving a different answer.
There is
it seems like you don't have a core axiom. Yeah, it seems like you're not consistent here. Like,
there is something. The person probably just
doesn't know
what the axiom is that they're operating within, and that's why it's creating all of this contradiction. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So,
no, I tried to but it's really hard to put your hand on it, even because I've tried to think about this. So you might say, okay, well, the answer to that problem is in the bridge one, you are physically touching the person and throwing them over the bridge. So that's a direct violation of his autonomy. Yeah. Versus with the switch, you're not actually like touching him, so it's fine. So I brought that up to Manu, and he's like, "Oh, okay, fine. So beat a guy with a bat, and then it's fine because you didn't actually physically touch him." And I'm like, shit. I'm like, yep, damn it. Because that axiom is just wrong. That's definitely not.
Yeah.
That's definitely not what it is. I'm like, because in my head I was so proud. I was like, I got it. It's because you're physically invading this guy's space. Yeah. And then I'm like, but then it's like, okay, well, what is the distance that you have to be for it to count as an invasion of space?
That's a perfect example.
You could argue that if I put the lever 1 inch from him, now that's an invasion of space too. So it's like,
shoot someone with a gun.
Yeah. I wasn't. Yeah, it was a sniper rifle and it was 100 meters away, so I didn't really invade his privacy. Like, no, dude.
That's a prime example of the logic skill that you just described, which is use the person's axiom against them. Catch them in a self-contradiction. Yeah.
And that's the only way to on principle disprove the person. Now the thing that's funny is, honestly, you get to this is where we got in the abortion talk, is like, you get to the point where it's like, you can't even, like, principles get thrown out the window. You both are like, okay, well, if we go purely by the principles, purely by the books, and this is what Peter Singer apparently stays by the books, even when it's like the most ridiculous arguments. But if you go purely by the books, you have to end up justifying a lot of things that seem pretty crazy, and like you would never believe in, right? Like if you only like bestiality, I think is a good example of this. Like there's no reason that this should be illegal, but murdering a cow in cold blood for no reason, even when you're not going to eat it, is completely legal.
Yeah.
Then again,
murdering it in the most brutal way possible.
Yeah. Just for your own pleasure too. Yeah. You're allowed to slowly slit a cow's throat because you like it. That's fine, but bestiality is illegal. So, but no one wants to be like, other than Peter Singer, no one wants to be like, yeah, bestiality just fine, bro. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
Right. Same thing with incest. Like, and I find this really funny too when you tell people like, what is morally wrong with incest? Because people just have an instant disgust with it. But like, okay, why is it morally wrong? Like, why should it even be illegal?
People always use the talking point of like, oh, because the baby is going to have a lower IQ or something.
Yeah.
What it is?
And it's like, first of all, funny how you're making a eugenics argument because I don't think you would make that in any other circumstance. Like if I said, should two low IQ people not be able to have babies because their baby will be low IQ? They'd be like, no, that's eugenics. So it's funny how they change the argument there. And second, then you just hit them with okay, if they're both infertile, is it okay? So if they're both sterile, like if they both can't
it's still,
have kids.
But it's
and
still
the person,
feel wrong
the person's going to be like, well, no, it's still wrong. And it's like, okay, well, you still haven't given me the reason that it's wrong, though, based on your actions.
Dude, so then
and you get to the point where it ends up, the person just says it's wrong because it's disgusting. But and this is a really big problem because what happens when you can make rules that aren't based on any consistency? You get stuff like gay marriage is not acceptable, or like because people just that's the exact like in my opinion that's the exact same argument as saying incest is wrong. And like although with the incest you could say maybe like it changes up the family structure or it messes with the family, but I could make all those amendments because I could just be like, okay, let's say it was two people who knew they were related by family but didn't have any other family and met on a dating app, and they knew they were brother and sister on the dating app, they just never had grown up together, and people would still say it's wrong. So no matter what circumstance you give, people will just say it's wrong, and it's just purely on disgust, basically. It's not on anything other than that, which lets you justify anything, basically, because if you can justify things because you personally don't find it appealing, not because it's based on any axiom.
Well, it is based on a axiom. It's just not one that you can explain or that you can identify.
Yes, and it's also, but the problem is it's also not applied consistently.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. But, so do you think people are, when people make claims like that, do you think there is something at the bottom, or do you think they're just switching axioms when it's convenient? Do you understand the question?
Yeah, so
like with the trolley problem, like, do you think there is something that they can't explain that combines those two situations? Or are they literally just operating within different
This is an interesting
structures?
question. Yeah, so this is honestly, the answer to this almost doesn't matter to me because...
And by the way, real quick though, one of my friend Miles, what he was saying about Wittgenstein, which neither I nor he has read, but his friends have read it and he's talked about it a lot. Supposedly, what Wittgenstein was saying is that if you can't speak about that sort of layer
under,
it doesn't exist. That's what he proves in his book, is that
thing
that's going on here,
axiom,
it's not there. It doesn't exist. So people are just switching between different...
Wait, no axioms exist, or just if you can't describe that?
Oh, if you can't describe the axiom. Okay. Now, I don't know.
Yeah.
I haven't read it. He hasn't read it, but okay, and I'm not saying we need to debate the whole the language. We don't have to get into a linguistics argument about this, and whether or not the interpretation of Wittgenstein is correct or it's just been molested through broken telephone. whether or not that's the case, it is an
that question is still interesting.
It's an interesting idea of like, if you can't talk about it, is it there? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Okay, well, I'll give my answer to the first question. So the question of, whether do people just switch between them, or is there something underlying that they just can't describe? Mm-hmm. And I was pleasantly surprised to find that this is basically the exact same thing with economics versus behavioral economics. Because with economics, they just loop everything in and say, everything must be rational. So if a person did something because of the sunk cost fallacy, it must have just been because that thing provided them more overall utility than if they didn't do it. Versus behavioral economics says like, no. They didn't do the thing that they most wanted or gave them the most utility, precisely because they are irrational. It's like, this is how humans act, and then they have a bunch of exceptions.
Wait, what was the...
So it correlates.
What was the first one?
The first one is
I completely spaced out.
The first one is everything a person does is rational. Yeah. So they loop. So let's say you fall to the sunk cost fallacy. Someone who's like the truest economist ever would just be like, rational? They would loop it back in. Well, they would just say like,
it hurt more.
Yeah. They would basically be like, well, the emotional attachment that you built to it actually was an increase in utility.
Or they would say like they
the
wanted
extra,
the cigarette.
Yeah,
so therefore,
exactly.
Therefore,
exactly.
it had that much value.
Yeah, exactly.
It was a good win-win exchange.
Yeah, so it's
the cigarette that kills them and gives them lung cancer.
Yeah.
Win-win exchange.
Yeah. So it's just a looping back into the framework, whereas behavioral economics says, no. That's not part of the framework. Like, this is an exception to how people say they are going to act. They are acting in a distinctly irrational way, opposed to what is the best outcome for them that they have defined for themselves. So the reason this is the same is because when you're talking about like morality and do people switch between the things, the answer to that question almost doesn't matter, because it's like, okay, either they're like the economists who just say, well, everything is rational, and somehow I just have a rational preference to save my mother over a random person, or even save my mother over two random people, right? They just say, oh, well, you should be doing that since you have some axiom that gives you allegiance to your family. And then there's the other camp which says, no, it's an irrationality, even though it would be utilitarianly or in a pure, strict sense better, morally speaking, to save two people rather than one. You have connected to this other human, who happens to be your mom, to an irrational degree, which causes you to save them, even though on principle this is the incorrect thing to do. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So you can do this thing where you just loop in every action.
Yeah, maybe it's just
you can loop in every action that you think into saying it's correct by just
I see what you're
saying there must be an underlying axiom, but we don't know it. Or you can take the behavioral economics route, which is, nope, like, I've built an irrational connection to this one human, and I favor them, and it's, on principle, it's the wrong thing to do, but I've just happened to like this person, so I'm going to take that decision.
Yeah, maybe it's just my axioms, but it just feels like it feels like the behavioral economics framework is just more correct. Is that just because my axioms...
You mean with morality, or you mean with economics?
You
mean through the analogy, or actually just behavioral economics is more correct?
Both. Like,
okay, yeah.
How are you gonna do the mental gymnastics to say that
looping everything into
ration? Like, you can't tell me that, like, tell me what you think of this example, but like the cigarette is, despite the fact that the person's been trying to quit for 30 years, they bought a cigarette. Therefore, they wanted to do it, and therefore, what they paid is how much it's worth to them, and that's how valuable it is. And like, no.
Yeah.
Real, like, is that... I mean, I'm sure you can articulate the idea better than I can, but, like, that just... Like, is that really... Can you really loop that back into... Like, can you really fit that into the framework?
Exactly. And I'll give you another example, because an economist would like to say, like, oh, well, the only reason people are ever in friendships is ultimately due to selfishness, like, because of what they could potentially get from the friendship. And, you talk to someone like Manu, it's like, no, that's not true. People, regardless of whatever the transactionality of the friendship is, because, like, it feels tempting to be like, yeah, well, if you think about it, technically, to some degree, every friendship is just transactional, because we're talking right now because we enjoy each other's company. So we're both, to some degree, you'd think doing it out of selfishness, right? And I'll tell you why that's not true. And the reason that that's not true is, if we were to stop this world today and, like, we reset and I completely forgot who you were, but you remembered who I am. I bet if you saw me succeeding with my juggling stuff, a smile would be brought to your face.
Yeah.
Even though I had no idea, I would have no idea who you are or that you even existed. So that, to me, seems there's an irrationality there, because there's nothing, at that point, there's literally nothing for you to gain from it. Like, I don't know who you are even at that point. I've completely forgot. Yet you still have an emotional attachment to me more than you would with a random person that you've never met. That has to be an irrationality, and to me, you can't loop that back into transactionality to any extent. Like, that seems to isolate it, yet you would still have the emotional attachment, which seems to me like this is just irrational.
The only counter argument might just be that over time, maybe I wouldn't have a smile on my face after enough time.
Maybe
not because I'm a sick fuck.
Yeah,
but because, like, maybe
after
a while, I just, like, redevelop my axioms so that
Right.
now you're no longer my friend.
But would you still say at the beginning, if you didn't have an
If you
extra
didn't
bright
remember
smile,
me,
seeing
but
someone who you perceived as your friend, but in fact has no idea you exist,
I think I would, let's say...
you shouldn't have any more stake in that person's success than any other stranger's success.
Let's say, like, you forget who I was, but I see you succeed with, like you have a video that just goes crazy viral, you break the internet, but on that day you forget who I am, but I still remember who you are. I think I'd have mixed feelings. Like, I'd be pissed that you didn't know who I was, but I'd be like, alright, good for him. Which is more than if any other juggler in the world succeeded.
Yeah.
I just wouldn't give a fuck.
Yeah, exactly. The fact that the emotion is higher in the negative or positive direction is an irrationality. It shouldn't be like that if you have nothing to gain from that specific transaction. And this happened in, like, Spider-Man. Not that this is a realistic portrayal of exactly what would happen, but everyone can understand that if, everything reset and you see Zendaya, who used to be your, who was going to be your future wife and girlfriend, and you see her in the store, and you still have an emotional connection to you, and she's like, she forgot completely who you are, and she's like, sorry, can I help you? Like, doesn't know who you are. The connection doesn't break. And to me, that's an irrationality.
Yeah.
I don't see how...
Well, I guess this does happen.
I don't see how an economist who's honest with himself could try to loop that in.
I mean, this does happen. Like, people's parents, like, have neurodegenerative... whatever. They have diseases that basically impair their memory, and the people still, like, their kids and their families still go and visit them. Is that...
Yeah, and they still treat them like their mom, even though the mom doesn't know that this is their daughter.
Yeah. Well, I guess the transaction is that they still feel good for seeing the parent or whatever. Right? So that's what they get out of it.
I suppose, but it shouldn't be an equal transaction. It shouldn't be thought of as the same transaction as when the person didn't know who you... Sorry, as when the person did know who you were.
Yeah, but you still do it.
Yeah, but
you
still
capacity,
take... Though. I don't know. You still... The fact that even the feelings towards that person would even still be there once they forgot about you. It shouldn't be... The fact that it even could be to the same extent you smiling at your friend's happiness when your friend completely forgot who you were and was erased from your memory.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be equal if it's completely transactional.
But it wouldn't be equal, though. It'd be, like I said, it would probably be slightly more mixed.
Yeah.
The emotions.
It could be equal, though.
Yeah, it could be. And I think a son who sees their mom with Alzheimer's or without probably has equal love.
Yeah.
Or, I think it would be equal. Like, I think it would be.
Yeah.
Despite the fact that it's a completely different transaction.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, fair enough. Do you think that people can talk about axioms, though? That's another thing I was wondering. And I think we did kind of address this. We sort of... Our whole thing with, like, the axiom at the bottom layer and the discussion that we were having before was, like, sort of related to this, but I want to kind of hit this head on, if we can. Do you think that people can talk about axioms, or can they... Like, do people know what axioms they're even operating within? You know what I mean?
I think very few people do as much analysis of their own axioms as we do.
No, but like in circles that we operate within, in philosophical circles, like, do you think it's realistic that we can talk about our axioms, or are people just always going to be operating within unexplainable or axioms that they can't express? Does that make sense?
I think they can express a good chunk of them. I think there's edge case exceptions, but actually I think, for the most part, and I think even the Bible does a fairly good job at giving pretty base axioms that we all can say are true in almost every case. Like, so like, you shouldn't end conscious life for no reason. Pretty sure that's one that almost everyone can get behind. And I think that book Justice by Michael Sandel also does a pretty good job of just laying out the three main axioms, which are utilitarianism, liberty or promoting virtue. So, like the trolley problem is a good example of you're putting up utilitarianism against personal liberty, basically.
Yeah.
Or same with the organ donation case. Like if I could kill one person and use your organs to save 5.
Yeah.
You're pitting those two frameworks against each other. But at the core, like, so that's another interesting aspect, because it's like, well, how much of each do you believe? Because like for some people, 1 versus 5 in the trolley problem is enough for them to say, switch it to the 1. But for other people, they say that's not enough. Then you change it to 10 versus 1.
Yeah.
Then they probably switch. So it's also to what degree do you prefer each axiom?
The other thing that I was sort of thinking is...
I think the rest of them are... My opinion, I'm with you, though. Like, the rest of them are edge cases that are not axiomatically describable and are in fact just exceptions.
The rest of what?
The rest of cases where people say they would do the same... Like, the inconsistency, for example, of the bridge versus the lever. I think that's actually, in large part, an emotional irrationality.
Yeah, so I don't know.
Not an axiom that people just struggle to describe. It's just a...
Do you think it's realistic to say, like, okay, now we should do the work of figuring out what axioms we should operate within, or are people always going to just have emotional attachments to, like, or emotional irrationalities or emotional quirks? You see what I'm saying? Like, because theoretically, in a perfect world, you know, with this information that we have different axioms and that's kind of limiting us in terms of our moral discourse, now we should just basically agree on axioms. We should agree on, like, you know, the Sam Harris axiom, which is that if everyone was miserable, if everyone in the world's hand was on a burning hot stove right now, that would be bad.
Worse.
That would be worse
than if that wasn't the case. Yeah.
Do you think we can do that? Like, do you think we can adjust, whether it's that axiom or not? That I was sort of just joking around. But do you think it's realistic for us to, like, kind of handpick axioms now? Like, do you think that's like a fair way of going about it, or like a realistic way of going?
I think the best way to go about it is to argue in different spheres. So first, you should argue with people and talk about the theoretical sphere. And this is like the on paper, if I'm being
but you're
fully
arguing
consistent.
about axioms, though.
Yes,
but
you
you're
should
using
discuss
axioms. You're using axioms to make those arguments, though.
Yes.
So then doesn't that just bite its own tail?
Like, what is the question? You shouldn't use axioms in that?
Well,
do you want to repeat the question? Maybe
let me figure out a way to phrase this. Okay, let's say me and you have an argument about it. It's hard to phrase it as a question, but it's a little easier to do it.
Example.
Phrasing it as a hypothetical is a little bit easier.
Okay.
If we're arguing about an axiom, right? Like we're arguing about this axiom.
Yeah.
Right? Is this a good axiom or a bad axiom?
Yeah.
We're using our own axioms already to have that. Like, I'm using this axiom, and you're using
that axiom.
this axiom, which might be different.
Yeah.
So then
is
that going to limit? You admit that we're both using different axioms already. Like, the fact that we're having a discussion about axioms presupposes...
This is like the abortion thing. One person puts bodily autonomy as their more important axiom, or even, I'll just do the trolley problem. One person's axiom is utilitarianism is basically takes priority, and the other person is libertarianism takes priority.
Yeah, but
there's no progress to be
so let's
made.
say, all right, let's start arguing about which axiom we like more.
Yeah,
but each side is using their own axioms.
Yeah, no, I don't think. I think if as long as you've identified that you are both.
Should we start playing around?
You can. As long as both parties have acknowledged that they're arguing under different, or that they have started at different axioms, then I think at that point you say, okay, look, we've hit a disagreement, and I don't think we're gonna like convince each other by talking.
So that's how you agree to disagree.
Yes, that's the only time where it's okay to agree to disagree. And I think you can try to convince someone to change their axiom, but you can't. Mon, you would really like this. You can't do it by talking to the person. You have to make the person experience your axiom.
Yes.
Yeah. So
okay, that answers my question.
Yeah, so I think if me and Micah, for example, or me and you have a different opinion.
Just torture him.
On
then he'll understand his emotions.
Yeah, if we do a different trolley problem.
I'm
if we do the trolley problem, maybe you say on theoretical, you're a libertarian on the trolley problem, so you think we shouldn't switch it to the one person because that's violating that person's autonomy. Then I put you in a scenario like that maybe, and you see the person, you experience what that's like, and you're like,
You make me the one person.
Yeah, I make you the one. No, I make you part of the 5.
Wait, because it would go to the 1.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. No, I make you the 1.
You make me the 1,
and then I switch it to you.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, you still believe that?
Yeah.
And then maybe your axiom changes, but I actually don't think it's.
What's a very Jordan Peterson point?
I don't think it's really actually worth spending like that much time.
But that is theoretic in a perfect world.
Yeah. So you would really try to do that by experience, and the opportunity cost. Not to be an economist, but the opportunity cost of spending time arguing that is definitely lower than operating under economic assumptions, axioms. Yeah. It wouldn't be worth doing this.
Very Jordan Peterson point, and I've been doing his lecture series, so I have all of his ideas like fresh in my mind.
Mm-hmm.
But he talks about how and I'm sure you've heard this idea, like when someone goes through a breakup or when someone goes through like a traumatic experience or like a PTSD. PTSD is a big example that he brought up. When people have these like traumatic experiences, usually what's happening is like there's a fundamental core axiom that just got shook up, and now it's proven it's proven wrong. Like people see the world as people are good, right?
Yeah.
People they get caught up in bad situations, but people fundamentally are good. Mm-hmm. For example, right? That this might be an axiom that people have, and then great, but then you see something that's horrible.
Yeah.
You see someone do something, or you read about. There was an author, I forget who it was. I forget what she wrote, but JP talked about this in a different lecture. That he or she I think committed suicide. Because the stuff, it might have been the Rape of Nanking, the author of that, which I don't know much about, but whoever wrote that book committed suicide, or was near suicide. But basically, this person went through so much trauma because of what they had to research and come to understand writing this book. So you can read about it, you can see it in the world. When someone has that axiom and then they see just pure malevolence, that axiom
breaks.
It breaks down.
Yeah.
Because you've carried yourself in such a way where you think the world's a good place. You've oriented yourself in such a way that you believe that the world is a good place.
True, yeah.
And then you see that it
gets shifted under you.
The whole knowledge structure collapses because this thing that's held up all of these conclusions, you pull out the Jenga block and then the whole thing falls apart.
Yeah.
So, interesting idea, but I think it connects to the point that you brought up about experience can change axioms, right?
Yeah.
Because people's axioms get taken apart through experience.
Yeah. And
it can lead to some, as JP was talking about, some terrible psychological consequences. But that is how axioms change.
Yeah.
According to a clinical psychologist.
Yeah. I'll bring in my favorite dude, Alex Hormozy, on this one. Is that he also says, like, you question all your beliefs except the ones you truly believe, and those you never think to question. That's the core problem, which is like...
the core problem
is that you only talk about one dude. No, but...
Yeah. It's an unprovable truth that
that you gotta stop, bro.
Yeah. Yeah.
That you need an intervention.
Yeah.
That shit's an unprovable axiom.
Unprovable axiom that you have this dude's dick in your mouth.
Anyways. I think that's true. It's like, it's really hard to question the beliefs that you see the world through, because you can't even think to question those, because those are the glasses that you're wearing, you know?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I agree. I think they can only be changed through experience. And I talked to a friend who...
Keep going.
Okay. I talked to a friend who was also talking about... We were talking about... Because I think he has, like, a nicotine addiction. And I was just talking about it with him, and I was like, have you, like, he stopped maybe for like a month and then goes back to it and blah, blah, blah. And so I'm like, have you seen instances of people actually stopping? Because I was talking about, like, how somehow, like, psychedelics are, like, one thing that have actually been shown to be effective in stopping addiction, which is, like, unbelievable. And he's like, yes, and every time it's like they go through something, like, life-changing. And then they stop. You know, it's like, no one stops, no one's like, I should probably stop, and then has stopped for good. But the times he's seen people stop for good, he said, is like something life-changing happens. Like they see maybe they see firsthand someone who smoked nicotine their whole life and is now has lung cancer and is on the hospital bed, and they meet someone like that and they changed forever.
Yeah.
And so I think it's weird, but I think you have to some degree, just go through something like that to actually change a core axiom or a belief like that. That's not an axiom or a belief, but even a habit, I mean, you could argue to some degree is a form of axiom. It's just like a form of repetitive behavior, you know, that's within your psyche.
I'm going to make a point inspired by self-help Coop. So, I remember, I think it was Dr. K. I might be wrong here. I feel like I've said too many things in this discussion that might be wrong.
Yeah.
But there was some conversation about,
well, it's just as good as basing it off any axiom anyway, so.
Yeah, fair.
Yeah.
Can't know absolute truth.
Yeah, you can't know anything
matter.
anyway, so you may as well.
Yeah. There was some discussion about, like, do people need to hit rock bottom to change? And I remember the answer being, like, you can always go lower. Like, nobody really hits, like, pure rock bottom. Because, I mean, it might feel like rock bottom. It might seem like rock bottom. There's always slightly worse thing. Like, it could have been a little bit worse. As horrible as the situation was, could have been a little worse, always. So, people don't need to hit rock bottom to change. They need to feel like they've hit rock bottom. So, like, I wonder if there's a way that you could kind of train yourself to think about, like, sort of small everyday moments as, like, wow, that experience, like, I want that to give me the kick in the ass so that I change my life. You know what I mean? Because if you could train yourself theoretically to think in a way like to use a nicotine example, I missed a class because I missed crucial information that was on a test, for example, because I was in the bathroom vaping.
Yeah.
Right. Like, I'd imagine that for most people who are addicted to nicotine, that wouldn't be enough.
Yeah, it's like, oh, that's annoying, but meh, whatever.
But what if you could train yourself to think in a way where, like, that was enough? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
I was going to say something earlier, but I just remembered.
Yeah.
I remembered that I was going to say, remember how I was saying, like, there's, because we were talking about the axioms thing, there's, like, the theoretical world, and then there's, like, the practical world.
I just rewatched Oppenheimer.
Yeah.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, so the thing I was thinking of saying is we should use, and we have these emotional irrationalities, we should use those to benefit ourselves. So we should basically use our emotional irrationalities as humans to influence people to do the things that they are core on. So, good example of this with the nicotine is like... Oh,
can I give my favorite example
give
of this?
It, yeah.
This whole studio.
Yeah.
Now I'm gonna record all these episodes.
Yeah.
I might as well spend all this time on the studio.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter how I feel. I spent all this time in the studio. Might as well.
Yeah. I'll give
is that the sunk cost fallacy?
Yeah, maybe.
I don't give a fuck.
You aligned it with what your principles actually want.
Yeah.
I'll give you two more good examples. So, I'll give you the better one first, actually, I think. Like, with cigarettes, I'm pretty sure what they did in Europe is they know it's bad for you, but obviously liberty is something most people believe in, so they didn't want to say cigarettes banned, okay? So what they did instead was they put on packaging, like, pictures of what someone's teeth look like 5, 10, 20 years after smoking, or what someone's lungs look like. And what's funny is if you put a warning, I don't know the exact example with cigarettes, but like there are examples like this where like you put a warning, cigarettes will cause increased cancer likelihood by 20%. No one gives a shit. Put a picture of someone on their deathbed with lung cancer on the packaging, and it reduces people who buy that package. Now, all of a sudden, it's the same exact cigarette in that situation. Sutherland would love me here. It's the same exact cigarette, but you've just appealed to their irrational emotions.
And the same exact consequence.
The same exact information is presented, just in a more emotionally driving way. Yeah. And now you've aligned it with what they actually, on paper, think is the right thing to do. So this is what we should be trying to do with when we use emotion in an argument, and when we make appeals to how people feel. Like, you know how in the abortion thing, someone might say, like, you know, a pro-lifer might say, you know, what if I took that baby out and you got to see it cry on the table? You know, that might influence someone to be more sympathetic to a pro-life position. They have to use those arguments to align with, since they know humans are going to be irrational, they need to use them to align with what humans should say that they should be doing on paper in the first place. So the second example I was going to bring up was like UNICEF takes advantage of this a lot. Like when you see because right now there are tons of hungry children who if you donated $1 right now could be fed. But that can't register the same way as when you open up a magazine and you see a picture of one malnourished kid who's like, you can tell, needs food and has a tear running down their face. Most humans have the principle that we should help other humans when we can. But they won't do that unless the emotional irrationalities are, like, there's no reason that they should, like, the common example with this is, like, people are very hesitant. Like, if I told you to donate $100 right now to someone who's about to die in Zimbabwe, you wouldn't care. Probably. Or you'd probably be like, yeah, but I could always do that, like, blah, blah, blah. You probably wouldn't do it.
No comment.
Yeah.
No comment on that.
But you probably would comment on this. If someone was drowning right in front of you and you were wearing shoes that had a resale value of $100 and you didn't have enough time to take them off, would you jump off and save that person?
Yeah.
Exactly. So, but what's the difference there? They're both saving exactly one person. One's just slightly more emotionally detached.
I would have donated. Asshole.
To be clear, I'm not donating $100 to Zimbabwe right now, but I would jump off the thing. If someone right now was about to die and I had to sacrifice, even my phone, if I probably had to sacrifice, to save someone's life who was drowning right now, I would probably sacrifice this, which is like $1,000 probably, to save that person's life. It's just an emotional irrationality, but what we should do as humans is use this as a nudge in the direction that people have set rules for themselves that they want to do on paper or on principle. So we use the irrational practical world to influence people closer towards the theoretical moral frameworks that people have on paper for themselves.
It also kind of leads into the very Petersonian question of like, what does it mean to believe in a principle?
Yeah.
Because you can feel like you have a principle, you can say you have a principle, but if you're not acting in accordance with that principle, except like when you're kind of nudged in that direction, do you really have that principle? It's an interesting question.
I think maybe yes. It's hard to say, but I'll give you an example where maybe the answer to that is yes. Is like, because this also always was brought up. If you bring up a pro-life position in an abortion debate, someone will inevitably say, yeah, but if you got your girlfriend pregnant at age 19 or like at age 15, you would definitely want her to have an abortion, blah, 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 right? And I say yes. And if I could cut off someone's toes and I would be given like if I owed someone $10 million, but I could get rid of that debt by cutting off one person's toe, I also would want to do that. And if it was completely legal, I might just do it, to be honest. But that doesn't mean I think that's how society should operate, or that's how. So that's an example where I feel like you can be contradictory with how you would act and still believe in the thing. You know? Yeah. What do you think about that? Because on other things, I do think what your actions do represent your beliefs. But on this one, I actually don't think it necessarily does.
Yeah. Well, Yeah, I guess, but you'd have to just say that you'd have to admit that your actions were wrong, though, right? You'd have to admit that, like...
Yes. So
I
don't think it's
really
right to cut off someone's toe, but I
Yeah.
did it because it benefited me. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so I guess Yeah.
So I guess it's not even...
You can... I mean, yeah. Yeah.
It doesn't even go against my belief.
I feel like people... And I feel like everyone does things that they admit are wrong. But they can still believe in the principle. Right?
Mm.
But they admit that what
they
did
fell
just
short
doesn't-
of the principle.
Yeah, but then again, does that mean you...
Didn't believe in the principle?
Yeah, it's hard to say.
I don't think so. I think you can acknowledge that you believe in it and you...
But you didn't follow it because
Yeah.
you just didn't want to.
Because of folly
Yeah.
and greed.
Because of what?
Folly and greed. This is like, I think it was in Greek
What's the reference?
literature, is like, these are the two things that they say are like the downfalls of humans. Like, folly, which means like foolishness,
Yeah.
and greed. And I think the idea is like, if humans didn't have those two things,
Yeah.
they would be perfect, but they always fall short because of folly and greed, basically.
Yeah. Got it. Did you have anything else? I had some follow-up, but I lost it.
Yeah,
Did you
sorry,
have
I
anything else
interrupted.
you wanted to
No, we were at something, and then I remembered about me wanting to say that you should use emotion to nudge people to what they would do on paper. That's where I rudely interrupted. So if that helps you remember.
Doesn't. I
Okay.
completely forget. Alright, so I think we sort of finished that discussion. So JP and the lectures. He
Okay.
brought up this really interesting idea today that I was going to bring up on this podcast, which is that in your lifetime, you're probably going to meet 1,000 people.
Is this the 1,000 times 1,000?
And those,
Yeah.
all those 1,000 people
Yeah.
know 1,000 people.
Yeah.
So that's 1,000,000.
Yeah.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah. Well, there's two crazy things I take from that. One is how he talks about it.
And that's
like,
one more person, and then that puts you at like 1,000,000,000 or something
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. The two things that are crazy about that to me is, one is what he says, which means it's scary because it means every time you do something good, it's having a better impact than you think it does. And every time you do something bad, it's having a worse impact than you think it does. So it's, on the one hand, empowering to know that whatever you do, it's impacting everything more than you think it is. But on the other hand, it's scary because it's like, okay, no matter what I do, even if I take inaction, even if I do nothing, that's impacting more people than I thought it was. Like, even if I decide to stay inside and try to, like, not do anything to anyone, and I watch Netflix, like, you're not having a neutral impact. You are having a non-positive one.
As an overthinker, like, I view this information as honestly a little bit threatening, because how am I not supposed to just
Think
hear
about
that and be
every
like,
single thing you do.
exactly.
Yeah. Well, the answer is your answer when you were like, why should I take a philosophy class? Because I basically already know how to act. The answer is you basically already know how to act good, for the most part. Like, be nice to people, don't steal, don't rip people off, don't lie if you can.
Well, here's an interesting thing. It's like, is philosophy even about, like, the discussion that we just had for the last hour and a half, like, how much of that is genuinely about serious ethics versus just us kind of, like, having a good time talking about the, how, like, kind of the way ethics works, but not really, like, this doesn't really, let me finish, doesn't really have serious bearings on how we're going to carry ourselves in the world.
Right. I don't think...
You know what I mean? Like, is philosophy even about ethics at that point, or is it just kind of a fun thing to discuss?
I think it's more fun than it is practical, but I'll give a counter-argument. So, what we were talking about was how, like, almost anything you talk about, unless you tell me, oh, I was going to do this, but I was worried it might hurt this person's feelings, what do you think I should do? That's the only time where it's like, okay, this actually is you're directly talking about what's the right thing to do here. When you're thinking about a whole ethical framework, I think in the long term that is a helpful thing to do. And the other thing I was going to say is...
And we're also talking about how people should talk.
Right. And we're also talking about principles. So, again, there's the theoretical world, which is where we were in. And then there's the practical world, and then there's like the irrational emotional world. And so we were existing at the core of where ethics exists to inform the other two, like ones that are lower down.
Can you explain that?
Yeah, so like we were talking about on paper, what do we believe? Like, or how does ethics work? And we are saying, okay, on paper you can say you believe these things, and then in the real world it's shifted differently because there's logistical problems, and then on top of that you have emotions that play a role, which maybe are irrational. And so I think even getting to where we did, which is like, can you have a contradiction between like saying you have a moral axiom and then having an emotional thing that tells you to do something differently? What do you do there? Like, that's an actual question.
Yeah.
That will come up in your life where you say, like, look, based on everything I know about morality, there's nothing that would say this is wrong, but I don't know, this feels kind of wrong. Or maybe the opposite. Maybe, like, everything I know tells me on paper this thing should be wrong, but I feel like I'm doing the right thing by doing this.
Yeah. Yeah. I see. Yeah, I don't... If you really had an axiom, dude, do you... And this is kind of circling back to the question. We'll come back to the whole ethics and philosophy thing in a second. But I just want to add in one more question about the whole axioms thing. If you truly had an axiom, could you really contradict that axiom? Like, if you truly...
With my actions?
With something you argue, or with your actions. Like, if someone truly had an axiom, like, truly, because an axiom is supposed to be something that's like, no questions asked, this is true.
Mm-hmm.
Would it even be possible to contradict yourself in that sense? Because you have something at the bottom that's guiding everything you do. How could you contradict it? You know what I mean?
Well,
does that make sense?
I don't know. I think you could say, I think, harming conscious experiences is immoral, even if it's for personal gain. But if I cut off this dude's toe, I get $10 million. I still might do it, even though I think that thing is wrong. So yes. Unless you want to say that, this is another framework question, because then it's like, you could just be like, well, then he must not have truly believed in that axiom.
Yeah,
but I don't... I think if after the fact of the action, the person says, yep, I did the wrong thing, and this axiom is still true, and if I'm being honest, and if God existed, he should probably put me in hell for life for what I did.
Yeah.
If the person says that, it's hard for me to say.
Now
it's hard for me to say that's not an axiom, that the person didn't truly believe in the axiom.
Maybe this is just kind of reduced to like a subjective view of what it means to believe something. Because you might say, he clearly believes it. I might say, well, then he wouldn't have done that.
Yeah.
That shows that he doesn't really believe it. Can we even have a debate here about like, who's right?
Yeah.
Not really, I don't think.
Well, yeah. There was another thing I wanted to say actually earlier. This reminded me of it, of the how the cigarettes thing, like adding the like lung cancer thing, is like, because you were like, well, how do we get people to change? Like, you were like, oh, well, maybe even just on a micro example, people could see. What was the example you brought up? Do you remember?
With cigarettes?
Yeah.
Like, people who tried to quit cigarettes for... Oh, wait, was it the vaping in the bathroom thing?
Oh, yeah.
That was the thing that I wanted to...
Yeah.
Fuck. Okay, that's what I wanted to go back to.
Good.
But anyway, the
vaping in the bathroom.
So, the question that I was raising...
Yeah, how do you make that feel worse?
How can you make that feel like rock bottom so that
you change?
It gets you to change,
Yeah, so that it shifts your axioms and then you change your actions.
Yeah.
This is an interesting question. I don't know the answer yet, but we're going to work through it, and I'm going to start with this, which is I heard a clip of Tate talking about this, and he was like...
Wait.
Andrew Tate. And he said... Okay, I heard Mr. Unknown talk about this.
Yeah, some like person, you don't remember who it was.
Yeah, it doesn't even matter. Well,
yeah.
Well, I believe that it doesn't matter who said anything because the thing has either truth or not truth, regardless of who said it. So, and if you say otherwise, that's an appeal to authority fallacy. But whoever said this made sense to me. He said, like, he/she said, since we don't know who this person is, said that people say they want to change, but don't actually want it. And, like, the reason he can say that is because if you had your hand on a burning hot stove, you would take it off. It hurts too much to leave it there. That even if you were trying to play the game of how long can I leave it there, you would take your hand off. Because you couldn't stand being in that state. And this is what you don't need to, I don't think it's necessary or even moral necessarily to think the same thing about this with wealth, but this is what he was relating it to. He was just like, and some of you people who are broke are talking like, oh, I want to be rich, but then you don't, when you are poor, you're not in a state of pain at all. Like, you're not bothered constantly by the fact that you're broke. He says, when I
couldn't sleep.
Yeah, exactly. He couldn't do, like, it would be it's like...
I couldn't cook.
It's metaphorically the same to him as if he had his hand on a hot stove. Like, he could not leave it there.
So how do you get yourself to feel that?
But that's more interesting. Like, I don't know why he saw someone else driving a Lamborghini and felt the same thing that you feel when someone else touches a hot stove and they know they have to take their hand off or they're going to hate their life. Or I don't know how Alex Hormozy, like, there are tons of people who hate their business consulting job, but Alex Hormozy hated it so much that he was finally driven to the fact to say, fuck this, I'm leaving and I'm starting my own, like, gym or my own business. Dude, if you bring this guy up one more... No. But yeah, I honestly... Because there are a lot of people, for like in both of those examples, where they're in those exact same scenarios and they just don't get they don't get in as deep of a pain that they haven't achieved the outcome of other people. I think that was also a driving force of why I was able to get over my cringeness of posting videos online for the first time, is I just couldn't stand not starting a side hustle and not even trying to be successful with any side hustle that I started. And I'm like, this is one I could be successful in. And not trying it would be so painful to me that I have to do it, even though I feel extreme cringe, like posting a video of myself online. Like,
yeah, I guess for me it was like, my journey was a little different with that. Because it wasn't that I couldn't stand not starting a side hustle. It was that I couldn't stand not doing the thing that I wanted to do because of other people. Very, very odd. I haven't fully worked through that idea yet.
What if it was... So if it was because of a different reason, you think you wouldn't have done it?
I don't know.
Let's say the reason you didn't want to do it...
I don't know. I'm just saying this is what it
felt
This is just the way that it...
Okay.
I'm not making a rational...
Okay.
I'm just saying this is sort of how
what
it
you
played
experienced.
out. This is how it played out. I wanted to start a podcast, but I sort of delayed it, procrastinated on it because of, I guess I was like sort of scared to be cringe, sort of like what you were describing, or like kind of enter a space that people didn't really view me as a part of. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think people viewed me as like a podcast host. So it just felt a little weird.
Yeah, all your jock friends feel similar.
No, it's not that. Because everyone was pretty supportive about it.
Yeah.
But I just sort of had it was more that I think people viewed me as a jock. So doing this felt like I was going so against what people saw. Yeah, which is really uncomfortable. For whatever reason. So, but ultimately I just got so sick of that feeling, which is like, what are other people going to think of this? I got so sick of that. So sick of like outsourcing, or not outsourcing. Like I got so sick of like putting my life on hold because of this thought that, honestly, looking back, had no validity to it. Because everyone was pretty supportive in the end, and I don't know. Maybe there are people who aren't supportive about it that I don't know about. But I think people are supportive about it, or they just don't even know.
I do think it has a lot of validity, though, based on our evolution. I think it just doesn't have a lot of validity.
It doesn't have validity in the sense that like I was right. I don't think I was right. Like I don't think people actually care.
I agree with that, but you do have the
it makes evolutionary sense.
You are designed to really care about standing out.
But that can mislead you.
I agree.
And I think it misled me here.
Yes. In modern society, yeah.
But anyway,
it's the whole example of like, you know, the one where they painted the zebra with a red stripe so they could keep track of it.
Yeah, I've never heard about this.
So okay, you'll like this. So these team of researchers, they wanted to keep track of a zebra. Like they wanted to study it. So they marked it with like a little red piece of paint so they could study it. And a group of lions came and they targeted the one with the red stripe and it died. And so this is what happens. This is what happens when you don't blend in with the crowd. This is why we are evolutionarily designed to not stand out, not be cringe, not post a video, not walk around in public eating a celery stick, even though that's healthier than eating a corn dog. You know,
like tastes terrible.
Okay, that too. But if you had the desire to do that, walking around, like if you walked around just eating a cucumber, most people wouldn't do that because it's socially not acceptable, not because they don't think it's the healthier or better option for them.
Well, because you get killed by the lions.
Yeah, exactly. But that's what I'm saying. Now, in modern times, you post, and guess what happens? No one gives a shit. Yeah. But back then, you get painted with a tiny red stripe, you die, and everyone else is fine. That's what happened to the people who stood out.
But anyway, to continue the story, I guess it wasn't that I got sick of, like, not doing the side hustle. Well, I was sick of not doing the podcast, but I could have just done it quietly. You know what I mean? But I got sick of, like, because, I could have just done podcasts without really telling anyone about it. It probably would have been fine. But I was sick of, like, other people's opinions holding me back, specifically. Because that was also something I dealt with as an athlete, where I was kind of scared to, make a certain play because the coach might take me out, someone might laugh at me in the crowd. Yeah. You know what I mean? So I was like, all right, I'm so tired of this block. Like, fuck this. You know what I mean? So we both sort of had different.
Is there something that made you change?
It just got
increasingly higher until it passed the threshold, and then you just said it. Was there like a thing that happened though, or no? Just
getting to college probably helped. I mean, I remember
then you didn't have
starting. Yeah, like I remember posting the podcast on my Snapchat story pretty early on in my semester at college, which it's interesting because that was probably the loneliest time of my life. So I don't know if that has anything to do with it. You know what I mean? Because you're not.
Yeah.
Which could tie in evolutionarily.
You're not surrounded by
Because I'm no longer under the illusion that I have my family
need to stand out from. Yeah.
I need validation from all these people around me because at that point in time, there's nobody really around you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like you're not really keeping in touch with most people from high school anymore. I mean, some of them you are, but they're also doing their own thing at their own school.
Yeah.
So they're trying to make their own friends. I'm trying to make my own friends. But I also haven't really... Sorry. To go back, because of that, the people from high school... most people from high school you don't really talk to anymore. And then the people from college you're talking to a lot, but you haven't known them for nearly long enough to actually consider them a friend that'd be worth seeking validation from.
Yeah.
So you don't really have any friends in college. You're not really
tied to your friends from high school.
So you're just in this very strange in-between area. Which, as lonely as it is, I think that is a really good time to push yourself out of your comfort zone in terms of and what I mean by that specifically here is doing something that you wouldn't really be comfortable with your friends seeing under normal circumstances, right? Because you're at a time in your life where you don't really have that many friends.
Yeah.
So that's I guess I'm sort of coming to this conclusion now, but it seems like right when you get to college or in any of these kind of in-between times.
Yeah, right when the environment changes.
Yeah, socially speaking, that's a good time to do something that kind of gets you out of your comfort zone in terms of judgment. You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Those in-between times it's good to do something that you might feel uncomfortable about. Yeah, I take it back. It's not really about pushing yourself out of your comfort zone. It's about doing something that normally would be a step outside of your comfort zone because of the judgment of others. But in these sort of in-between social times, those others aren't there to the same extent, so it's a little bit easier to do it. There we go.
Yeah.
That makes sense?
Yeah.
All right. So yeah, how else? So that's one aspect of it, but we still haven't really uncovered the issue of...
Yeah, how do you create that pain?
How do you...
Well, in sales, you describe it to the person better than they could describe it themselves.
The pain?
Yeah.
Maybe it's
that's how you trigger someone to buy, and you also describe to them the pain of inaction or of not buying.
I have an idea.
So if someone's struggling with a problem, you say, "Oh, how long have you been struggling with this?" Or like, "How long have you been stuck on 3-wall cascade?" A really long time. And when you practice, are you able to make progress? They say, "No." I'm like, "I get stuck." "Oh, that must be frustrating." "Yeah, it's really frustrating." And you get them to live that pain in. Live in that pain before they... to persuade them to make a decision to give you money.
So maybe if a salesman can effectively get someone to do something because of the pain that they're in by describing the pain better than the customer can describe it, then maybe you can apply that logic to, like, within my life, I need to do a better job of describing the pain to myself.
To yourself, yeah.
And maybe the way to do that is by becoming more articulate in the way that I think. And I think a great way to do that could be journaling, honestly, because you're writing your thoughts down in a way that has to be coherent.
Yeah. I'm also going to say, I think a good way to do it is imagining yourself on your deathbed, because it's harder to remember. It's harder to think of the perspective of what you'd regret, and it leads us way more towards inaction until we think of it through that framework. So, like, if you are sitting on your bed thinking, "Oh, bro, these people are going to judge me if I post a video," you don't think of how much pain you're going to experience if you don't post the video. You can only really see that retrospectively by imagining yourself 80 years old, your body can't move, you can't make videos anymore, and your chance to make them has passed. How would that feel?
Terrible.
Exactly. And that's the pain that you have to describe to yourself. That's what happens if you don't take action. And you need to remember that not taking action is this... Inaction is action.
Now that it's convenient.
Yeah. Now that it fits within my argument, I'm going to use that.
Yeah. No, yeah. I mean, I definitely think that one of the... Based on what we've been talking about, it seems like becoming more articulate with your... It's interesting because most people talk about being articulate in the context of discussion.
Others,
but nobody speaks about...
how to have a good...
self-dialogue.
Yeah.
Like articulate self-dialogue.
Yeah.
There. That might be... That's the...
We solved it, guys. Yes.
Yeah, we solved the problem.
Yeah.
So basically, by articulating the pain that you feel, by articulating the worst-case scenario thoughts, the worrisome thoughts that you're experiencing in those moments of kind of small, painful events, right? If you have a small, painful event, maybe the way that you can kind of generate enough pain to get that event to propel change is by, and this is the theory that I think we've been able to develop, articulate the pain better than you possibly could. Like, do such a good job, or better than you thought you could. Like, do such a good job of articulating the pain of that small event to yourself that you've used the trick of a salesman to get you to act in the way that you want. So you've sold yourself on acting,
on taking action.
Exactly. You've sold yourself on taking action in the way that you want. And maybe a great way to do that is journaling. Maybe a great way to do that is visualizing the future. Maybe a great way to do that is journaling about what your future would look like.
Yeah.
If you gave into all your impulses.
Yeah. Yeah. I was going to say, this is starting to sound exactly like JP's future author.
I knew it was going to end here.
Yeah.
Damn it, JP. Why does this guy answers? Why does this guy get to all the conclusions before us? All right. Well, that's a good place to end it, I think. So.